Welcome to the Hustler's Manifesto podcast. We jailbreak from toxic hustle culture. We take hustler back from a belief that bigger is better, security is contingent on compliance, and freedom is reserved for the powerful. I'm your host, Sarah Duran. I'm not here to tell you how to make a quick buck. I'm here to change the way work is done so that we can live more meaningful lives right now instead of betting on an uncertain future. If you value this content, please rate it and comment on this podcast wherever you get it. If you're a freelancer, consultant, or solopreneur who needs better strategy for your business, learn more about what I do at fruitioninitiatives.com. Thanks for being part of the movement. Ryan,
Hey, Sarah, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's Friday. How are you doing?
Best day of the week.
Best day of the week for sure. I'm excited to chat with you today. I think that thinking about having a financial brain for your solopreneur business is very important. Let's go ahead and jump right in with the first questions that we ask everyone. Who are you? What is your work? And why do you do it?
Okay. Yeah, I love the way you just said financial brain for your business. I'm not fond of that, so I'm gonna have to steal that for my
It's all
marketing.
yours. It's all yours.
Um, so my name is Ryan Page. I'm a man, husband, and father living out here in Nashville for fun. I train jujitsu. I play the saxophone, enjoy the sauna and cold plunge, and running with my dog. I have a Vizsla, so very high energy. Love. She makes me smile every day, just watching her run through the fields and chase birds. So yeah, that's what I do for fun. For work, I help people learn how to budget. So basically, a financial organizer for solopreneurs. And I landed here. If I take a step back, is I had the traditional accounting background, undergrad, grad school, master's in accounting, and then CPA, worked for a big four. And I was in an accounting team in Fortune 500 company, and just started to feel like this work is important, but I'm just like, it's important, but I could just make a mistake and it just isn't that impactful. So yeah, I started to feel like I wanted to do work that made an impact. And that's what led me to wanting to work with small business owners. And yeah,
Tell me about what is the biggest, no, not biggest, what is the most common question that you get from solopreneurs about their business finances? Like, where do you start with people?
that's the most common question. Where do I start? I've just not paid attention to it. I've ignored my finances. My books are a mess. So I just don't really know where to start when my finances are commingled and just what do I do? The starting place for me is typically um, I go back to net worth. So I just have this spreadsheet that basically lists everything. So it's here's your assets, here's your liabilities, and then let's just have a starting place for everything. And then from there, I have an app called YNAB that I use, stands for You Need a Budget. Um, I did their coaching program last year and it's been great. But basically, yeah, YNAB then helps assign a plan for the cash so that it's okay. Here's your overall picture. Here's the puzzle. We've put it together. And then now we'll create a plan for this cash, the liquid portion of your business and or personal, and move forward with the cash plan and then learn how to keep a cash plan or budget, some people say, but a lot of people are terrified of that word. So cash plan.
Yeah, it's funny. I am maybe just because I'm like real OCD about my finances that
Yeah.
the budget is like actually the very first thing that I did when I
Yeah.
started my business because I was like, if I'm bringing in this money, I got to figure out like how much can I actually pay myself? I'm
Yeah.
bringing in this, but I can't pay myself all of that, obviously.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I have relatively very low overhead, but like at that point, I had very low overhead. But it was like also, you
Mm.
got to pay for some things.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there's actually, if we even need to take it back like a couple steps to your point about the main question you get from folks is like, where do I start?
Yeah.
Talk to me about, I heard you use the word commingle, which I think is
Mhm.
an important one to talk about. What
Yeah.
are like the top three things that you encounter when you start working with someone where you're like, hey, let's not do those things. Like maybe let's stop doing those things and start doing these things.
I think the biggest one is basically I opened up a business account and I started using that as only my business and personal account. People just stop like having separate personal accounts. And I think the right structure is basically they're two separate entities. You have your business account that sends money to your personal account. So I think that's something that is one of the biggest things. And I think that sort of comes over time by building the budget and the cash plans. Because when you're like, I have no idea what's where, what subscriptions are where, just it helps to not get so sucked into some of that and basically just separate it a little bit over time. That's one of the biggest things. Another big thing on the QuickBooks side is I just match my transactions. Oh, my books are accurate. I just match it the way QuickBooks says to match it. And QuickBooks never does it right. There's like certain workflows that a lot of people don't know about. It's not, I don't know, the QuickBooks forums are tough to stay up with, but basically like recording revenue needs to follow a certain path, and not just assuming QuickBooks knows what to do. So those two things. And then a third is like forecasting is really just, okay, books is good for looking backwards. Cash planning is good for developing the plan forward. But then like, how do we actually forecast what the next year is going to look like from the business perspective and try to actually hit that? Like I'm talking P&L basis, because I think the cash component is covered through the YNAB stuff.
Yeah, so that's why I ended up like, I've had QuickBooks since the day I started my business. I opened a business
Yeah.
bank account
Yeah.
but I built my, like, budget in
Hmm.
a spreadsheet that, like, I've
Hmm.
adapted over the years. So, at this point, I feel like it's pretty legit for a spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but it
It-
is that thing where it's like, people I encounter all kinds of solopreneurs who are like, "I have QuickBooks or FreshBooks or Honeybook," whatever you're
yeah.
using for that, like, "I have an accounting system." And
Hmm.
I'm like, "Yeah, but do you know how much money is gonna be left in your bank account by the end of the year?
Yeah.
If you've brought in the money you think you're gonna bring in, and you've spent the money you think you're gonna spend,
Hmm.
how much are you making money?" I come across a lot of people who, like, don't actually know if their business is profitable, which I
Yeah.
think also is an interesting distinction because and maybe we can get into in a little bit, like, different way like, paying yourself if you have an
Yeah.
LLC versus not, et cetera, but
Hmm.
profit doesn't necessarily mean the amount of money you're putting into your bank account. So,
Yeah.
like, paying yourself and that's your salary, then, like,
Hmm.
profit is ultimately, like, what's left over at the end of the year. Like, what do you
Yeah.
or what's left over quarterly that you're, like, giving yourself on top of your, like, normal paycheck.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me to see the distinction between profit and cash. Like basically your P&L can show profit, but then you're like, I have no cash. That's where if it's an inventory based business, there's a lot probably tied up in inventory, or if you have like certain debts, then a lot of debt transactions don't affect profitability, but they drain your cash. Some clients just run into cash crunch, but they're like, why do I owe 100K in taxes or something? And they have no cash. So
Yeah.
that's always terrible to see. It's cool that you use all these fancy spreadsheets to project out your balance. That's, I think, one of the simplest templates to use is basically beginning cash. Here's a section for my anticipated inflows. Here's a section for my anticipated outflows, and basically just by week at the top. And then that way you start to just track at least a little bit of the monthly cash flow a little bit. I can see it as a pain to have to do that separately, but also like spreadsheets are fun.
I'm with you on that one. Spreadsheets are fun. And it's interesting because it's definitely not which is like the caveat I always have to give people. Like the folks I coach, I like give them my template and I'm like,
Yeah,
all right, you can use this to do this, but this is not a P&L. This is
yeah,
not accounting software because it's projections. And while I'm like pretty OCD about it, like I update
mhm,
mine multiple times a week sometimes
yeah.
where I'm like, signed that, like, the ink on that contract is dry, I'm gonna put it in, or I'm gonna change it. I have a color coding system in mine, like,
Yeah,
pending, committed,
good for
and
you.
or I'm gonna incur this new there's just so much visibility that I think it gives you to be able to make different decisions about your business, where you're like, "Hey, maybe it's time for me to invest in something different," whether that's, like,
Mhm,
a co-working space, or a coach, or a new computer, or whatever it is, and
yeah,
if you can't I don't know how you make those decisions if you can't put that in and be like, okay, what does
Mhm.
that do?
Yeah.
I'm gonna hire a VA. What does it mean if I'm gonna drop a grand on someone else every month?
Yeah.
What does that do to my bottom line?
Yeah. O Do you do that so you do that in your spreadsheet or you do it more in QuickBooks?
I do it in my spreadsheet, but I will tell
Yeah.
you that the lesson I learned last year, like I don't plug in I don't have a lot of like expenses that fall out. Like I have all my like overhead, my recurring overhead is all in there. So it's
Mhm.
like Zoom, my website platform, like all the
Yeah.
like operational things I need for my business are in there. But there's definitely things that I will buy on my credit card that I don't put in the spreadsheet.
Mhm.
And last year there was like a pretty significant, oh, I thought there was going to be a little bit more left at the end of the year than it's
Yeah.
actually in my bank account. So
Yeah.
somewhere along the line, there were like some expenses that I
Yeah.
didn't capture, but I was able to go back because I will tell you that once I had forgot to bill someone for something.
Yeah.
And I was able to go back and be like, why is this gap so weird? Is it income
Hmm.
or is it expense? And in my instance last year, it was expense. So I was like,
Yeah.
did I leave money on the table? No.
Wow.
I wish that would have been the answer.
Yeah,
But
dang.
yeah,
Well,
it's not perfect.
yeah, I think you hit on something that's very important for all of us as solopreneurs is you're never gonna be perfect with your budget and, like, to give yourself grace, so it's nice that you acknowledged that you missed it and you went back and still were able to update what you missed and still carry it forward, whereas a lot of people will be like, "I missed it. I'm done with this. Budgeting doesn't work."
Yeah.
And bury their head for another year, and then the next year be like, "I don't get this," and pick it up later. So, kudos to you for keeping it going,
Like, you
acknowledging
have
that.
to, like yeah, you totally have to give yourself the grace, and I think you also just have to recognize the difference between, like you said, accounting software is
Yeah,
one purpose, and, like, projecting cash flow is a different
yeah,
they are 2 different things.
yeah. I
So they can't replace each other.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I was going through and closing my books yesterday, and I was, like, basically going through and I was like, "So what do I even do with this information?" It doesn't drive anything going forward, and I was at a crisis. I was like, "What does my service even do?" Because all I'm doing is reconciling the past, but I came to the realization that, yes, I can reconcile the past, and that's still helpful just to see profitability by client. That's something that I really pay attention to, and that component helps me forecast that into the future outside of QuickBooks, but yeah, it was an interesting, like, question to myself. I was like, "What do I even do with this information?" I'm sure a lot of people feel that way, where they look at their reports and just like, "This doesn't mean anything."
Yeah, I think that can drive so many decisions that I think people sometimes make in isolation where it's like, should I be taking on that new contract? How much should I be charging for it? Can I
Mhm.
afford to outsource this thing? Or
Yeah,
I just think you're in if you don't have a good again, both sides, like good
yeah,
accounting system plus a good projection
yeah.
system for yourself, it's really hard to make those types of decisions. Like I was at a place at the end of last year where I was like, it felt completely unfathomable for me to I've had some operation support for the last few years for my business, but I wanted to be
Mhm,
more intentional about that and hire someone on retainer to manage my content moving forward.
mhm.
And if I didn't have my budget tool, I
Yeah,
wouldn't have been able to, I like would have been like, that's not feasible. I don't
mhm.
have enough money to do that. And I put it in my 2024 budget because I also in a real crazy way budget very far out in advance.
Yeah,
And I was like, oh, I can't afford that. I can
yeah,
afford that. And so I was able to make a really strategic decision about my business that I wouldn't be able to make if I didn't have that kind of data
yeah,
visualization of it.
yeah, that's awesome. I wish we would've talked about that the last time we spoke too, because that was like that's a great solution to the questions that you were answering around, like, taxes. It's
Yes,
like,
for
bring
sure.
people on to help you scale, take over the things you don't wanna do.
For sure, and that's the mindset shift of the, like, scaling solopreneur, right? Is instead of thinking like instead of thinking like, "Oh, paying that person $1,000 a month means that I am not paying myself an extra
Yeah,
$1,000 a month." You're actually now saying, I pay that person $1,000 a month, which allows me to take on more work and more clients and make
yeah,
more money." And it feels really counterintuitive. Like, I even still get stuck in that mindset sometimes where I'm looking at my budget and I'm like, "I'm
yeah,
paying a lot of money for" but it's the right thing. It's the right
yeah,
capacity, but the way you start investing in your business over time really shifts towards it's not just about the take home.
Mhm.
It's about, and again, that it is about the take home still. Because if you're investing in that stuff in the right way, then it's still increasing the amount of money your business is making, increasing the amount of money you're putting in your pocket.
Yeah.
But you just have to start thinking about it in a different way.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you.
Um,
Glad you made that investment.
it's been a real game changer. This person I contracted with is also like amazing. So she's changing my life.
Wow.
So I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, and this is out of left field, so you
Hmm.
tell me if if we can go here. One of
Okay.
the things that I often encounter with folks is when you first start out on your own, this is exactly how I started out. I was what in the States, because I think there's like a lot of folks across the world that listen to this podcast, but at
Mhm.
least in the States, I was what is called a sole proprietor. So
Yeah.
I didn't have an entity.
Yeah.
And then about a couple years in, I started working with an accountant and I got into an income threshold where she was like, "Hey, makes much more sense for you to be an LLC."
Yeah.
And not just be an LLC, but file as an S corp so that I'm paying myself as a W-2 employee.
Mhm.
And I'm curious if you can just like it's one of the biggest questions that I get from folks, and it's not I am not an accountant. So I'm always
Yeah.
like, here's what I think, here's what I've been told, but go get some professional advice on this thing.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about, like, when you start working with folks, or, like, when you get questions about this kind of stuff, like, how do you talk people through, like, sole proprietor, LLC? I talk to a lot of people who are like, "It has to be an LLC. If you don't have an LLC, you're doing it wrong." And I just don't
Yeah.
know if that's true.
Yeah. I wouldn't say you're doing it wrong. One thing that also just came to mind is I don't think I said my company name is Back Pocket CPA, but I don't file taxes. So I'm a
Important
CPA.
caveat.
Yeah, I'm a CPA not doing taxes. But anyways, so talking people through that, I think it's almost one of those decisions that we get hung up on that doesn't drive very much. I think you can spend a couple $100 and just set up an LLC, and then basically you're filing the same way as if you were a sole proprietor. But then also, one, it gives you that protection if you keep those separate bank accounts and everything. And two, it just basically say you decide to file that form later on to become an S corp, you're already basically there. It's just one less thing. So it's almost like, why not just form an LLC? But I guess to answer your question, like you don't need to file an LLC to start your business. You just be a sole proprietor and DBA as whatever you want. But my perspective is like, why not just become an LLC? You're considered a disregarded entity. You still file the same tax forms as if you were a sole proprietor. So I guess that's where I mean it's not like a heavy decision that drives much. It feels like that rude to say, but I'm
No,
sorry.
I think that's good, because I think that, like I said, if people, I think, get really tripped up on that.
Yeah,
Are clearly, like you said, there's liability issues is one of the main
yeah,
reasons to form an LLC. But the
uh-huh,
other thing I hear you saying is, like, whether you are an LLC or not, we're going back to this commingling thing. So, like, no
yeah,
matter what, when you start your business, even if you haven't formed an LLC yet, you need to have a
yeah,
separate bank account.
yeah, for sure. I think, I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, I think you're right that basically no matter what, always have a separate bank account. Yeah,
What else are we missing? What do you think is tripping people up about finances? And I think one of the reasons why I think someone like you is so important, and I think the caveat about not filing tax is a really important one,
yeah,
is that not everyone, like, this stuff comes pretty naturally to me, and like I said, I'm, like, pretty OCD about that stuff.
yeah,
I like it, and that's not true for everyone. Like, I come across so many business owners who it feels really overwhelming, and
yeah,
let it go on too long, it can become the thing that ends up tripping you up.
mhm.
So, what are the other main reasons why someone needs to be thinking more intentionally about their finances and probably end up working with someone like you?
It goes back to what we were just saying about you hiring help is if you don't like it, don't force yourself to really like spend your time doing things that are of higher importance and driving you forward and hire help for doing that. I guess if you're not at the point of being able to hire help or have the belief that you can't hire help, then accept that you're never going to be perfect with it and that's okay. And just take steps to try to understand, find like resources that can help you get set up in a basic way, or just like I said, simple template. Here's my cash, here's my expected inflows, here's my expected outflows. I think something like that. think everyone could benefit from the app YNAB. It's $100 a year. Basically, build out a cash plan and then ultimately see how you're spending your money historically. So I think those are some easy ways. And then when it comes to QuickBooks, don't just accept what QuickBooks says.
That's perfect. I think that's a great note to leave us on. Some like very like focused, targeted advice because I think that everyone need it, again, I think this stuff can just feel so overwhelming and so just even giving people a place to start can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Tell us more
Like,
about where we can find out more about you.
so yeah, my my company is backpocketcpas.com. So yeah, my company is Backpocket CPA. My website's backpocketcpas.com. So you can head over there and find out more about my company. I'm also on LinkedIn, Ryan Page. And yeah, I'm writing over there pretty much every day. So that's my fun creative outlet. I might need to pick your brain about getting some help with all that content stuff though, because it's a lot, but
It is.
that's where you can find me.
That's awesome. We'll link all of that in the show notes.
Awesome. Great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan.
Bye.